Hey guys, it's Jonathan Reutenberg, and this is Let's Talk About Things. I'm trying this out on YouTube, really seeing if streaming is something that I'm good at. Um, but let's see if things can go well. I might take this down if it goes horribly wrong, but let's just see how it goes for this first time. Let's start by talking about the coronavirus. I it's really hard to talk about this kind of thing because the news cycle just moves unbelievably fast. It's moving very fast these days, and I just find it very difficult to keep up with it. And so that's why I haven't recorded all that much. But I have some thoughts, I guess. It really seems like Trump is desperate for good headlines. He wants the news cycle to reflect good on him because it he has not been able to manage this crisis well. He could have done a lot of things early on that would have preempted this, but he didn't do that. He dragged his feet, and now he's just desperate for good headlines because that's his only hope of being able to win re-election. And it's at times like this when I really feel like people like Anthony Fauci and other people in his administration are breaths of fresh air because they actually know what they're talking about. They don't say, inject yourself with bleach. I just can't believe that people are actually trying that out. But there are actual scientists in his administration that are doing a great job at being able to convey factual information to the American public. And Anthony Fauci gave that testimony in front of Congress, and he was very factual, and he really conveyed the information that needed to be conveyed, and he went against the Trump administration's own narrative. I almost expect that he's going to be sacked by Donald Trump in the coming days, just because that's the kind of person Donald Trump is, and the fact that anyone who contradicts his message and makes him look so bad is not going to be able to last that long in his administration. But if Trump is smart, he would keep people like Anthony Fauci around and parade them out and have them answer more questions instead of having questions answered to him. Because Donald Trump only cares about a few things: making himself look good and going after the media when he perceives them as not treating him fairly, and when he can convince the supporters of the same thing. So that's just the situation that America is in, and it's really unfortunate. I just wish that we would have a president like, I don't know, Mitt Romney or Jeb Bush, that can lead us through this crisis, who doesn't care about headlines and really cares about getting America through this crisis, because this is a crisis unlike anything that we've seen really in our lifetimes. Anyway, but this is the situation we're in. And in other news, Bill Barr has announced that the Justice Department is going to drop the investigation into Michael Flynn. This is in spite of the fact that Michael Flynn pled guilty to lying to the FBI. So, for those who don't know, Michael Flynn met with Sergei Kislyak, Russia's ambassador to the United States, and in order to discuss policy. And this is in direct contradiction to the policy of the Obama administration regarding the lifting of sanctions. And so the FBI interviewed Michael Flynn, and Michael Flynn was not truthful. And on that basis, they charged him with lying. And he pled guilty to that. But now the administration is dropping that investigation. And I didn't even know that was possible if a person had already pled guilty. And I've heard a lot of people criticize the way that the FBI handled this investigation. And some of this criticism is valid. Others are completely bogus. But what I guess I would like to point out is the fact that Bill Barr, more than any other attorney general that I can remember, is really becoming Trump's personal attorney. The idea of the Justice Department being the personal attorney for the President of the United States is a completely new thing. And this is what the Justice Department has turned to under Bill Barr. And this is not the only instance that we've seen this. Right after he was confirmed, the way he announced the Mueller report was spun in a way that it made it seem like that the president was innocent, even though he really wasn't. The report detailed instances of obstruction of justice. And while it didn't establish that the president was part of a conspiracy with Russia to interfere in our elections, it did show that Russia tried to do it and did support Donald Trump. And it also suggested that it also implicated that Trump was guilty of obstruction of justice without explicitly saying that, because of their view that the president can't be indicted while he's in office. But the way that Bill Barr spun that made it seem like he was innocent, and it went against what the report actually said. And Bill Barr seems very much aware of the power that he has. And he said that once, that when Robert Mueller handed over the report to him, it was, quote, his baby. And he also said in an interview, and coming back to the decision to drop the investigation into Michael Flynn, he said that the history is written by the victors. And I just think that possibly even more than Donald Trump needing to resign, I think Bill Barr ought to resign as well, because what America needs is a Justice Department that enforces the law that Congress has established, not acting as the personal attorney to the President of the United States. Just think for a moment if Eric Holder was the personal attorney for President Obama. We on the right would be apoplectic about that. And I know this because of the things that we criticized Eric Holder for, and all of the scandals that were involved. And we were critical of other members of the administration, like when Lois Lerner, the chair of the IRS, went after conservative groups, specifically targeted conservative groups. We were outraged about that. And with Bill Barr essentially being a lackey for the president, it doesn't seem like many on the right are really up for criticizing him, even though I think that Bill Barr is turning the Justice Department from a neutral enforcer of the law to a personal attorney for the president. And that is something that we should not want to happen. Now, the Supreme Court looks like it's going to rule almost unanimously that the president has to turn over his taxes to the Southern District of New York and possibly to Congress, which is great because, for those of you who don't know, Trump repeatedly said he was going to release his tax returns. And he said he was, quote, under audit. And secret, he never released his tax returns. And so there's been ongoing investigations for a number of years to get those tax returns looked at. And those cases have been making their way through the courts for a while. They were just heard yesterday now. And it looks like from the argument, from the questions, it's not always possible to infer how a court's going to rule based on questions. But it looks like the court's going to side with the Southern District of New York and possibly with Congress and against the President of the United States. And that's important because government accountability is always important. And one thing I would like to see is for Congress to make it a requirement that presidential candidates release their tax returns. We made a big show of requiring that presidents release their birth certificates not too long ago. I think we should do the same thing with tax returns. It's useful information to have. It lets the American people know if a president is corrupt or not. At least it's a very good tool for determining that. The Supreme Court also recently heard to just today a a case that would potentially shape the Electoral College. They're going to rule on whether or not the that electors can vote however they want once they're chosen. It sounds like the court is going to uphold the current system where states have decided to require electors to vote a certain way or remove them if they don't. And honestly, I think that might be the right call, just because I really think that such a radical change to be forced onto the American people would be disastrous. Because think about what's going on. You're essentially saying that electors can vote however they want if the court rules that way. And that would open up the idea of, in a close election, for a small handful of electors, or maybe even one elector, to swing the election another way. And just think for a moment, if a president won, let's just think for a moment that Donald Trump won, but a faithless elector swung. But let's just think for a moment that Donald Trump won 270 to 268. Let's say he loses Pennsylvania and Michigan, but holds Wisconsin and everything else. He gets to 270 to 268, but a faithless elector decides he's going to vote for Joe Biden, putting the election to 269. That would put the Democratic-controlled House of Representatives in a very awkward position. And now, to be fair, it's not entirely, as I'm saying that, I'm realizing it's not entirely up to the Democratic majority, because each state delegation has one vote, and right now that's Republican-controlled. But that would put Congress in a very awkward position of having to certify an electoral winner, regardless of who, because even though the vote went the other way. And so I hope the court, and think about that. That would if the court were to strike down those laws and say that electors can vote however they want, you can bet that there's going to be a big movement towards a constitutional amendment abolishing the Electoral College and moving towards a popular vote. And this might sound controversial. I personally see the merits of the Electoral College. I like to call it the most Westminster part of a non-Westminster system. I live in a parliamentary Westminster democracy, and we don't, here in Canada, and we don't directly elect our head of government. We instead elect a parliament, the House of Commons, which then chooses the government. And that's how the British have always done it, and that's how Canada does it. And in the Electoral College is really based on that idea that the people don't directly elect their government, a body does, but instead of having Congress do it, they have a separate body do it. And so I see the merits of having the Electoral College. I know that some people would support a popular vote, but I do support the idea of the Electoral College. And I do understand that if the court were to rule that electors can vote however they want, that would absolutely accelerate the process of abolishing the Electoral College. I want to talk for a moment just about Ahmaud Arbery, the young black man who was in Georgia, who was shot by vigilantes and killed for entering a building. I've always tried to. I remember when I was a teenager, I really tried to deny the idea that there was racism in America's police forces, but it's hard to deny that when you see everything that's happened. For me, I guess the turning point was Philando Castile. For those of you wondering, Philando Castile was a Minnesotan black man driving through Minnesota. He was a father, a husband-to-be, and a legal gun owner. And when he told the police officer that he had a firearm, the police officer shot him. And ultimately, the court, wrongly in my opinion, decided not to convict him, or possibly even indict him. I'm not sure about that, but either way, he was let off scot-free. And to me, that was a miscarriage of justice. And I think that David French even said the same thing. And to me, the idea that that conservatives would stand up for a husband to be and a father and a legal gun owner against the overreach of the state, that should have been a slam dunk for us. Because again, a husband to be, a father, a legal gun owner being killed by the state, that goes against the very idea of conservatism, of small government, small c conservatism. And I think the fact that too many of us did not do that, is really unfortunate. And I've seen, well, in the case of Ahmaud Arbery, I've seen footage that was shared by the likes of, quote, Liberty Hangout. I use that in quotes because they're not about liberty at all. I've noticed a lot of their tweets are all about the opposite of liberty. But also people like Mike Cernovich and others have basically tried to make out that Arbery was not a good person, and they have utterly failed in doing that. He just entered a building, for God's sake. Lots of people enter that and do that all the time. They don't get shot. So I just think that this is something that we need to confront as a society more. Just the idea that maybe the old injustices, while the old injustices are gone, maybe some injustices still remain that need to be addressed. And this is not to say at all that all police officers are bad. Far from that. In fact, some of the police officers who are killed in the line of battle are themselves African American. And that's something that maybe many on the left may not be willing to point out as much. But I really do think that we as conservatives our natural inclination should be against the overreach of the state and of the government. And our natural inclination should be to speak out whenever the state kills someone, seemingly or actually wrongly. And we should demand accountability for those who are in power and who are entrusted with the duty of enforcing our laws. Because if they act wrongly, we should demand accountability. Anyway, why don't we talk about something more exciting? Let's talk about elections. Last night there were some pretty interesting elections. Not a few. There's been a bit of a lull lately, but there was a special election in Wisconsin, which is expected Republicans easily won. And then there was the special election in California 25, which ended with the Republicans flipping a seat. This is actually the first time since 1998 that a Republican has flipped a congressional seat in California. It's amazing because this was also a Clinton +7 seat. It's located in part of Los Angeles County and Ventura County. But it looks like the margin is going to be too much for the Democrat Christy Smith to overcome. She's actually even conceded defeat. But truth is, it's only halftime. They're going to be rematched this November, and the electorate's going to probably look a lot different. But for the moment, Garcia is going to be the next congressman from this district. And I think what it shows is the limits of determining elections based on the partisan lean. Dr. Rachel Bitecofer very often talks about how we can, infer how a district is vote based on the composition of the district and the way it votes in presidential elections, not necessarily on the quality of the candidates. At least not until she doesn't update the quality until the very end of the election cycle. But I think that, with all due respect to Dr. Bitecofer, this election shows the limits of that theory, because Democrats had a lackluster candidate who disparaged the military record of Garcia. Meanwhile, California Republicans have actually caught on to something that Florida Republicans caught on to a long time ago, which is that if you have a competitive district with Latino voters, run somebody who appeals to Latino voters. And in that case, it's Garcia. He was actually one of the best candidates Republicans have run in a while. He distanced himself from Donald Trump. He had a military background. He was a businessman. He really appealed to a lot of people. And I guess it's people on the right are basically saying, well, like, are deriding those who often extrapolate things from special elections, saying, well, why don't you extrapolate good news for Republicans? It's the truth is it's very hard to extrapolate things from special elections, and very often the special elections tend to work differently in different districts. For example, in Wisconsin's 7th congressional district, the Democrat outran Hillary Clinton by about 5%. And Tricia Zunker's margin of defeat was about 5 points better than what Hillary Clinton got. So it's very hard to extrapolate. And I think what this also shows is that the theory that Republicans are going to be harmed by all-mail voting is ludicrous. Republicans benefited from all-mail voting, arguably. And so I just think that the arguments that I think, especially now, there's very little argument to dragging our feet on establishing all-mail voting. And the Constitution gives Congress the power to nationalize the rules for federal elections, at least as far as elections for the House, the Senate, and President are concerned. So they can require that elections for the House, the Senate, and for President be decided entirely by mail if they wanted to. It just takes the political will. And so Garcia won. He should feel proud of that. He's going to be a congressman for the next few months at least. But I think that the electorate of November is going to be very different. I think that one of the things we saw was that Latino turnout as well as youth turnout was way down. That is not going to be the case this November, assuming that Democrats don't screw this up. But in the further east, in Nebraska, there was a Democratic primary for a potentially competitive congressional district. And it's Nebraska's second, Omaha, and it went for Trump by about 2.5%. Democrats, however, decided they were going to go with the progressive. Kara Eastman took the win over Ann Ashford. She took 61% of the vote, amazingly enough. And I would say that Don Bacon, the Republican incumbent, is a narrow favorite for re-election at this point. Had it been Ann Ashford, I think he would have been an underdog. But it just shows, in my opinion, the limits on progressive appeal, because Justice Democrats endorsed 45 candidates for congressional races that were held by Republicans. Not a single one of them won. And that included Kara Eastman. This was in 2018. Not a single Justice Democrat-backed candidate flipped a Republican-held district in 2018. Kara Eastman came the closest, but she fell about 5,000 votes short. But I am pretty confident that this is going to be a very close race nonetheless. And the DCCC is absolutely going to invest in this race and make sure that they support Eastman this time around. And it's going to be really close. There's already polling showing Biden up well ahead in Nebraska's second, because Nebraska allocates its electoral votes by district. And so Joe Biden looking really good in that district. 52-41 is what the poll said, whereas I believe that Eastman was only leading by about 1%, 48-47, I think. So I'm very confident that there's going to be plenty of Biden-Bacon voters. And I'm going to channel my Miles Coleman here and say the chances of Democrats bringing home the bacon, I don't think are really that high, but we're going to see how this turns out. Finally, I want to start a bit of a series of talking about the long-term trends in politics, and I want to start out with the state of Ohio. Ohio is a state that is normally, it's a classic Midwestern state, but it's normally about point or two to the right of the nation. At least that was what it was until 2016 when it surged to the right. It was about 10 points more Republican than the rest of the nation. And looking at the Senate race and some of the counties, you actually see, if you could, when I say Senate race, I'm referring to both of Sherrod Brown's elections in 2012 and 2018, and comparing the performance in each county from that time to the next. Let's start out with, and you get to paint a picture of where the Democratic coalition is emerging and where it's receding. Let's start out with the northeast of Ohio, which is home to various counties like Ashtabula County, first of all, which Sherrod Brown won by 9.5% in 2012. Obama won it by 12.2% the last time. But in 2012. But in 2018, Sherrod Brown only won it by 2.2%, while Trump won it in 2016 by 18.8%. So this is a county with a small city, heavily white working class, and Sherrod Brown lost ground here. Just for context, Sherrod Brown won re-election in 2012 by a margin of about 5.2%. In 2018, he won by 6.8%. So, but the shift was not uniform across the state, as I'm about to show you, because Ashtabula County, he slipped. You know where else he slipped? To the south, Trumbull County, which contains part of the city of Youngstown, another heavily working class city. The city itself is much more racially diverse, but Trumbull County in the presidential election in 2012, President Obama won it by 22.2%, but it flipped to Trump by 6.2%. Sherrod Brown in 2012 won this county by 29.8%. And then in 2018, he slipped to 15.8%. Want another example? Let's look at the rest of Youngstown and Mahoning County. This is a bit more Democratic. President Obama won it by 27.7% in 2012. But in 2016, Clinton only won it by 3.3%. That's a shift of 24 points to single digits. She only won it with a plurality. Sherrod Brown in 2012 got won here by a margin of 36.7%. Meanwhile, he only won by 21% in 2018. So you get the picture that I'm trying to paint here. The northeast of the state is home to a heavily working class population, and it was once part of the bedrock of the Democratic coalition. And you can see here, the Democratic strength here receded. But that leaves the question, where did it grow? Well, in order to discover that, we have to go to the big cities. So let's start with Cuyahoga County. Obama won this county by 38.6% in 2012, whereas Clinton only won it by 35.1%. This is there's a bit of a white working class population, but it's otherwise a big metropolitan area, and we get to see that in the Senate shift of the Senate race. In Cuyahoga County, Sherrod Brown won here by 41.5% in 2012. That became 45% in 2018. But let's look at an even better example. Let's look at Columbus. Franklin County is home to Columbus. And it was once a swing type of county in 2000, in the 1980s. Reagan, I believe, won here. But it's since become solidly Democratic in the 21st century. President Obama won here by 21.7% in 2012, but that became Clinton. But Clinton won by 25.9% in 2016. Sherrod Brown, meanwhile, won by 24.1%, but that shifted to 37.4% in 2018. So a 16-point shift in favor of Sherrod Brown. That is how you counteract the shift away, a shift away in the Northeast. Let's look at Delaware County. Delaware County is is a suburban county. Rock River Republican, at least it was at one time. Romney won this county by 23.7%. The county itself is, by the way, part of Troy Balderson's district. But Trump only won here by 15.8%. So his vote share declined here by about 8%. And we actually see that a bit in the Senate race. In 2012, Josh Mandel won here by 18.9%. But in 2018, Jim Renacci only won here by 5.2%. And so when you look at these upscale areas, you see shifts away from the Republicans that counteract the shifts that you see away from Democrats in white working class areas. Let's look at one more example. Hamilton County. This is home to Cincinnati. This was, as recently as 2004, a swing area. And George W. Bush won this county in 2004. Had Jeb Bush been the nominee, I think he might have won this county too. Obama only won it by 4.9% in 2012, while Clinton won it by 10.3%. And in the governor's race, this actually produced an interesting effect. Richard Cordray won this county over Mike DeWine, and he became the first Democrat in 36 years to win Hamilton County in a governor's race. And to put this into even bigger context, in 2006, Sherrod Brown unseated Mike DeWine in the Senate. I think he won by about 10%. Sherrod Brown did not win Hamilton County that time around. So, but he did win it in 2012. He won it by 9.3%. And then in 2018, he won it by 18.8%. So this is all a long-winded way of saying that the future for the Democratic Party is not in the Northeast. It's in the big cities, like particularly Columbus and Cincinnati, and as well as to a certain extent, maintaining their huge edge in Cleveland. There's also other areas where they have the potential to grow, like Dayton, Ohio, and Montgomery County, Toledo, Ohio, and Lucas County. Although, mind you, there were shifts away from Obama towards Trump in this county. For Lucas County voted for Obama by 30.4%. Clinton only won it by 7.6%. And if you want another a starker example of that, look at Stark County, which is home to Canton. Obama won it by 0.5%. Trump won it by 16.1%. Sherrod Brown won it by 4.4% in 2012. Jim Renacci flipped it by 1.4%. Sorry, I should correct that. No, I'm right. Stark County is home to Canton. Summit County is home to Akron. Sorry, just making sure I have my places all sorted out. But again, the point I'm trying to paint is white working class areas in Ohio are going to continue to shift towards Republicans, and while the big cities shift towards the Democrats. And while Sherrod Brown saw an overall shift in his direction, 6.8% versus 5.2%, it's not necessarily all good news. It really seems like, in at least in the short term, Ohio going forward is going to be a light red state as opposed to a true swing state. And it's going to become, I would say it's probably going to be the hardest state of the swing states for Joe Biden to win. And I would even go as far as to say is if Joe Biden is winning Ohio, he is winning pretty much everything a Democrat can possibly win in today's political environment. Because think about it. In today's political environment, in 2/3 of the states, the contest is already over. And it's really this 1/3 of states, about, I would say 17 or so, plus the congressional district in Nebraska, that are really up for grabs. And so if I would say that Ohio is on the far right of that spectrum, and if Joe Biden's winning there, as polls suggest that he is, he's winning absolutely everything a Democrat can win. And so he has reason to be optimistic right now. But I would basically say don't become complacent. Hillary Clinton relied heavily on optimistic polls, even though they did fluctuate more, and Joe Biden's lead has been very steady. Still, there's enough time for Trump to win this. It's never over till it's over. That is the attitude that Democrats absolutely have to take with this election. And that's why just on one more note, I want to talk about vice presidents very quickly. Joe Biden, if you're listening to this, please do not pick Stacey Abrams. She might seem appealing, and Dr. Bidikofer has made clear that she's a top pick. She is less qualified to be president than Sarah Palin. Sarah Palin was a governor. Stacey Abrams pretends to be a governor, or pretended to be a governor. That is the difference between the two. She is a former state house minority leader. That's an impeccable position, but it doesn't qualify her to be president. And your vice presidential pick is going to matter more than it usually does. So please, pick someone who can govern this country. Pick someone who would be boring. I think that people often criticize Joe Biden for being boring. I think that being boring is a real asset in this election. After 4 years of Trump, I would say it's an asset. And so I would like the vice president who could potentially assume the presidency at any time to similarly be boring. I know it's not going to happen. I know that Joe Biden absolutely has to extend an olive branch to the progressive wing of the party. That's been his strategy over the past several weeks and possibly a couple months, getting the Bernie faction of the party into his camp. And I know that his vice presidential pick is going to reflect that. But if we don't hear about the president or the vice president in the news for the force when he's in office, that would be a huge upside. And it would be a great improvement for how things currently stand now. Anyway, next time I do this, I'd love to talk about the trends in Texas, because Texas is right now occupying a similar spot to Ohio, as in like 10 or 11 points to the right of the country. But it's trending in a very different direction. I'd like to talk about that more. And on the whole, I really like how the stream went, and I would love to I'd love to continue doing this. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.